So my name is Seemit. I have a pleasure to actually be on the second data science day as well. The first one was maybe right before pandemic, and this is after the pandemic. So what I'm going to talk about actually is not something very specific, but a bit more general. I'm going to go walk you through the very beginning to kind of bring a context, and then we kind of get into how the AI is useful, some of the challenges of AI, how does the future look like with AI? And I actually want to spend a minute or two towards the end, actually, just to talk to the students and what I think actually is important for them to focus on, besides all the great education they're getting here, more on the soft skill and competency side of it. But let's take a step back. Take a step back by several hundred years. If you look at the evolution of humankind, especially in terms of machine-related stuff, the way I was kind of looking at that was the first revolution on that kind was, besides fire and other things, electricity is more about the industrial revolution, where we started to make things at scale. So what it did actually, it reduced the cost of production, right? The second revolution came with the invention of computers. And what it did was it reduced the cost of arithmetic, because the computer could start doing a lot of computation for you. The third big revolution is internet, right? Where what happened actually was it reduced the cost of communication. I actually remember my very first email I sent when I was studying at Mumbai in IIT, and we were sitting in a lab, and the person sitting next to me on his computer, I said a hello to him, and he received that hello. And we both looked at each other and smiled. And that was the level of communication we had. And now it's, of course, on a completely different level. And the last one, why we are talking here today, actually, is the revolution called AI. And within AI, I think there are a lot of revolution happening. The most recent one is almost like, just feels like in the same scale as the invention of fire and electricity and stuff like that, which is ChatGPT, right? But this last bucket is AI. So what is the advantage of AI? So as a practitioner, I've actually kind of seen the fruits of that, and I'm going to touch on some of these things. Broadly speaking, you can say that when you look at the corporate world or the industry, you kind of look into these four things. So you want to sort of influence the sales, you want to boost the operations, customer is the king. So how do you actually engage more and more with customers? And you want to generate insight of various kinds. So let me actually talk about a bit more of like some of these use cases. Hopefully students will find that motivating as well. So, and these are all the use cases that I've personally actually seen done. So imagine that you have a huge call center and you're trying to cater to a lot of customers. And many times customer call and sometimes they're not happy, and that's why they're calling as well. What if that AI algorithm actually knows the mood of a customer by the time they call, and they know the reason behind that mood, right? So the way I would construct that AI would be, let's say if I'm in a company, in a financial company, and I'm tracking my customer in a very legitimate way. Let's say they went to my website, logged in, tried to make a payment. So they went to a payment page, spent like 10, 15 minutes, couldn't really find a payment because I know they then left the website and then immediately called me, right? So I know that they're trying to make a payment, but they were unsuccessful. So the moment they call, I should know, that's a common sense, that they are pissed off by their inability to make a payment. And so instead of calling like, hey, Mr. XYZ, thanks for calling, if I change my customer empathy to say that, hey, thanks for calling, very sorry you couldn't make the payment, how can I help you set that up, right? And how can I actually teach you how to make that payment going forward, and tell me what I can do better for you? It instantly changes the tone, and there's a more connection with the customer for the right reason. And this comes from a very simple regression model or a gradient boosting model or a neural net. But it uses all this information that the customer footprints actually are left behind, and you just aggregate together, and that helps you, right? The second such example actually is many times we actually felt like our customers were not happy, because every company does the survey. So we felt like there is something going on. So we built a regression model, and we found that one of the most important variable was that when a customer calls and when we call back, sometimes it took more than 24 hours. So that's one of the key variables. You all know regression, right? I see many data science students, so you might know what a regression model is. So one of the most important variables was that. So what does that tell you? It says that for the call center, they need to ensure that they are actually responding to your customer timely. They should be doing it. But many times what happens actually is there is Frankenstein thing going on. Nobody's in intention not to call back immediately, but people don't realize that that's a flaw or the weakness in the system unless you actually do this diagnostic tool as well. So simple things. There is not a much of a rocket science, unlike the large language model and other things. They're simple models, but they're very effective in solving the problem of profound nature, right? So those are some of the examples I just wanted to call out. So with that as sort of the advantage, I was looking into the World Economic Forum, and I found this very interesting piece. This is actually 2 years old, but I think it's still very suggestive of what the future might like. I don't know whether this number are for next 5 years, 2 years. It seems like probably for several years horizon, that's tens of millions of jobs. But you can see that the job that will probably get extinct are the one which could be automated, right? And the job will actually prosper more and more are the one related to data science, artificial intelligence, and somewhat related fields. So if the students here have chosen that as a broadly that field, not just data science, but any quant field around that, I guess you are lucky and you have a good foresight because you've probably selected one of the hottest jobs in the market for at least next 1 to 2 decades, right? Or even more. So that's basically how the employment picture feels like. It's all promising for people in this room. Okay. But with all that advantage, maybe we'll spend like 1 or 2 minutes. But what are the challenges of AI? I'm sure you all actually have kind of thought about it. Let me bring this up more explicitly. You have, was this the one? Okay. So there are a few things that were headlines that I've kind of just put this here. So Uber drivers say that a racist algorithm is putting them out of work. You can just Google this Time article. I think the gist of the algorithm was that their face recognition algorithm that they actually had to use for their app. Now, this is several years back. So of course, things might be very different right now. Is that it actually was not very trained on people of color. So many times, if you are a people of color and Uber driver, it did not recognize your face as accurately as it would do for a white male, for example. So there were Uber drivers who actually made this complaint that it's a racist algorithm. The other ones, the top two actually are very close to, I guess, what I do. I don't create the bias, but that's a field that I work in, which is in finance. It's one of the most regulated fields for a responsible AI for the right reason, because you actually give credit to people, right? You give mortgage, you give credit card, you open a bank account for them and a bunch of other things. And what we want to make sure, and this is highly governed by the laws and regulations in America, and rest of the world is catching up. Let's say I'm building an algorithm to figure out who to give a credit card, right? So if I decline somebody, by regulation, I have to tell you the top 4 reasons why my credit algorithm declined you. It's all statistics driven. And those reasons cannot be a protected class. That reason cannot be age of a person, the sex of a person, the nationality of a person, and few other things. So then how do you make sure that your algorithm is not biased towards, let's say, age? Now, if you think about like who actually has a good credit, well, people who have done a really good job managing credit, right? Do you agree? If people are new to credit, you may be a little bit worried about it. I'm not sure. I've not really known this person. They might really default. But if you have somebody with 20 years of pristine credit, you might feel like, of course, I want to give a card to this person. They're awesome. But do you realize the bias you just created? You're actually saying that there should be at least 20 years of credit. It means that they have certain, at least minimum age. They're at least not 20-year-old. Do you agree? So that's a bias you created. So do you see the trade-off? Like the more accurate model you create, the more biases you create of unwanted nature. So that's basically the struggle we have. Like many times, it's not about, and this is what I wanted to tell the students especially, is it's not about building the most fancy and most accurate model. It's building the model that works the best under the constraints and works best for the problem you're trying to solve and for the people that you're trying to apply for, right? So in this model, what I would do actually is I would not use that particular variable. It's going to come at the cost of accuracy, but I'll try to substitute by something that's actually less biased introducing variable. So the top two, I'm not personally aware of that, but I believe they must have messed up on something of that dimension. And that's why they actually had that bias. But these are all the realities of the biases being created by the algorithm. And then there is this other situation where it almost kind of affects you at the core of a humanity, right? Where everybody here would have own value system. And there are nuances to that that we all actually might have. Imagine a self-driving car situation. And imagine this scenario on the left, where there are people on the passenger, and you have two options. If you keep going straight, then you're going to hit into the pedestrians and kill them. Sorry for being violent, but you can do that, or you can actually go and hit the curb there, and you actually can kill the passengers. What would you do? And I think the answer could depend on the person to person. When you ask machine to make a decision, what kind of uniform decision would you want machine to make, right? Same thing on the right. Would you maybe kill one person with higher probability or 2% with less probability? Of course, nobody would claim that they know the answer to this, but I'm just posing this very tricky questions that eventually, if the world is going to be operated by machines to such an extent, we probably have to overcome some of this very tricky situation as well. So it just makes you think the kind of problem that we need to solve as we journey our evolution on the AI as well. In the interest of time, I'll skip that. This is about the data privacy and security issue. I think you probably hear this articles coming up all the time that there is a security breach in all kind of companies out there. This is becoming more and more prevalent, and cybersecurity is one of the, along with data scientists, actually is one of the most hottest fields these days and will continue to remain so. But it's a big deal, and we need to continue to be on top of it. Fraud is actually another thing as well. In fact, I spend a lot of my time trying to actually figure out how do we stay ahead of the fraudsters. And I tell you, like, they are just so smart that we need to actually think like them, almost like a hackers kind of thing, and try to come up with the algorithms which are beating them and continuously retrain in sort of reinforcement kind of learning type of thing. But that's another kind of area of focus which has emerged more and more. We just talked about this, so I would kind of pass on that. But just with that sort of flying tour of all of that, starting from the evolution of sort of the machines through AI, the benefits of that and the challenges and biases of that, it kind of leaves you to kind of question few things. What happens? What's the impact of privacy as we move forward? How about mental health and happiness? There's the connectivity where you are partially engaged all the time. I think Thomas Friedman from New York Times, I think here this interesting word says that you're continuously partially engaged, but you're never fully engaged, given that actually I have a phone right now. I mean, I'm not going to pick it up, but all of you sitting there might have a phone and you might just look into that while listening to the call. It's not new. I've done the same thing as well. We are all partially engaged. And the fun and the joy of completely immersing yourself has kind of left us to a large degree. But that's just part of it. There are many aspects of it. Playing a video game is awesome, but there are all scientific evidence that it can actually affect your happiness in long term. And there is this whole bucket of, in the broad area of investigation into that bucket. Diversity and representation, the biases that we are creating, can we ensure that there is a diversity? Future of work, well, people have started to work from remote, that's for sure. But with ChatGPT, I think, again, the future of work actually is now taking a really different direction as well. And legal and regulatory impact. Me being in the banking industry, I live with that every day, but I do feel that this is going to stay not confined to banking industry. Tech industry is going to be there. Fintechs and many other companies are going to be under that umbrella. I hope relatively soon, because they do bring the right kind of perspective and bring responsible AI to the fore as well.